The bullet had gone clean through his canteen, and Joshua Reed knew he was going to die of thirst long before he made it to the next settlement. He had been riding through the Nevada territory for 3 days straight. His horse had gone lame that morning, and now, as the sun beat down mercilessly on this parched August day in 1878, he found himself walking on foot with nothing but half a strip of dried beef and a handful of stale biscuits in his saddlebag. The land stretched endlessly before him, all dust and sagebrush and mountains that seemed close but never got any closer. Joshua had left Yarrington in a hurry after a card game went south, not because he had cheated, but because the man who had been cheating accused him of it first. The resulting fight had left the other man with a broken nose and Joshua with enough sense to know he needed to clear out before the man's brothers came looking for revenge. He had planned to head east toward Austin, maybe find work at one of the silver mines, but fate seemed to have other plans. His throat felt like sandpaper, and his lips were already cracking. The horse he led behind him was in no better shape, its head hanging low, foam gathered at the corners of its mouth. Joshua knew he should put the animal out of its misery, but he could not bring himself to waste the bullet. Besides, the poor beast had carried him faithfully for 2 years. He owed it more than a roadside death. As the sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful if Joshua had not been so focused on survival, he spotted something that made him stop in his tracks. There, about 50 yards off the trail, partially hidden behind a cluster of rocks, was a figure slumped against the stone. His first instinct was to keep walking. In this territory, you learned quickly that not every situation was your problem, and getting involved could mean ending up dead yourself. But something made him pause. The figure was small, too small to be a threat, and it was not moving. Joshua changed direction, leading his limping horse toward the rocks. As he got closer, he could see that the figure was a woman, her long black hair matted with dust, her brown skin burned dark by the sun. She wore a simple dress made of deerskin, adorned with beadwork that had seen better days. Her feet were wrapped in worn moccasins, and her lips were cracked and bleeding from dehydration. She was native, that much was clear, though Joshua could not tell from which tribe. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. She might have been 18 or 20. It was hard to tell with the state she was in, but she was young. Too young to be dying alone in the desert. Joshua knelt beside her and gently touched her shoulder. Her skin was burning hot. He had no water to give her, but he could at least check if she was conscious. Her eyes fluttered open, dark and unfocused, and she looked at him with the kind of confusion that comes from being too close to death to understand what is happening anymore. "Easy now," Joshua said, his voice rough from his own thirst. "I am not going to hurt you." She said something in a language he did not understand, her voice barely a whisper. Her hand moved weakly toward her mouth, the universal sign for hunger and thirst. Joshua sat back on his heels and looked at his horse, then at the woman, then at the vast, empty landscape around them. He had maybe 4 hours of walking left before dark, and he had been counting on those biscuits and that strip of beef to give him the strength to make it through the night. If he shared his food with this woman, they would both likely die. If he left her, she would definitely die and he might make it. The calculation was simple, cold, and logical. But Joshua Reed had never been particularly good at logic when his heart got involved. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out the strip of dried beef and the biscuits. They looked pathetically small in his sun-darkened hands, hardly enough to sustain one person, let alone 2. But he tore the beef in half and broke the biscuits, then gently helped the woman sit up. She was so weak she could barely hold herself upright, so he supported her with one arm while he held the food to her lips with the other. At first, she tried to push it away, perhaps not understanding or perhaps too proud to accept charity from a stranger. But hunger and thirst eventually won out, and she took a small bite of the biscuit. Her eyes widened slightly at the taste of food, and she chewed slowly, carefully, as if afraid it might disappear if she moved too quickly. Joshua watched her eat, then took his own portion and chewed it methodically. The beef was tough and salty, the biscuits dry enough to choke on without water, but it was food, and food meant survival, at least for a little while longer. They sat together in silence as the sun continued its descent. The woman finished her portion and looked at him with those dark eyes, and for the first time he saw real awareness in them. She said something again in her language, and though he could not understand the words, the meaning was clear enough. She was thanking him. "Do not thank me yet," Joshua said. "We are both still in a bad way." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. Then she struggled to her feet, swaying dangerously. Joshua jumped up to steady her, but she held up a hand to stop him. She pointed to herself and said, "Talise." "Talise," Joshua repeated. "I am Joshua, Joshua Reid." She nodded slowly, then pointed toward the mountains in the distance and said something else he did not understand. But she gestured for him to follow, and after a moment of hesitation, he did. Talise walked slowly, clearly still weak, but there was a determination in her movement that suggested she knew where she was going. Joshua followed with his horse, hoping this was not some delirium-induced journey to nowhere. They walked for perhaps 20 minutes, the light growing dimmer with each passing moment, and just when Joshua was beginning to think he had made a terrible mistake, Talise stopped and pointed. There, barely visible in the gathering darkness, was a small spring bubbling up from between two rocks. The water collected in a natural basin about the size of a wash basin, before trickling away into the thirsty ground. Joshua felt his knees nearly give out with relief. He let his horse go to the water first, watching as the animal drank deeply, and then he knelt beside the spring himself and cupped his hands, bringing the cool, clear water to his lips. It tasted like salvation. Talise drank too, more carefully than the horse or Joshua, taking small sips and pausing between them. When they had both had their fill, she sat down beside the spring and looked at him again. In the fading light, her face was softer, younger. Joshua guessed she was probably around 20, maybe 21. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with fancy dresses or painted faces, beautiful in the way that wild things are beautiful, natural and unadorned. They stayed by the spring that night. Joshua had no bedroll, having left Yarrington in too much of a hurry to pack properly, so he made do with his saddle blanket. Talise curled up on the other side of the small fire he managed to coax to life with some dry sagebrush and the matches he always carried. The fire was small, barely enough to keep away the chill that came with the desert night, but it was light and warmth, and those things mattered. As he lay there looking up at the stars, Joshua wondered about Talise's story. How had she ended up alone in the desert, clearly starving and dying of thirst? Where was her family, her tribe? But he had no way to ask her, and she had no way to tell him, so he simply closed his eyes and tried to sleep. He woke to the sound of voices speaking in that same language Talise had used. His hand went instinctively to the revolver at his hip as he sat up, his heart pounding. The fire had died down to embers, and the sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky with pale gold light. Standing around the spring were 5 men, all native, all armed with rifles and bows. They wore a mixture of traditional and traded clothing, their long black hair adorned with feathers and beads. One of them, A man who looked to be in his late 40s with a face carved by weather and hardship stepped forward. Talise was awake too, and when she saw the men, her face lit up with an expression of pure relief. She stood and went to the older man, speaking rapidly in their language. He listened, his dark eyes flicking from her to Joshua and back again. Joshua slowly stood, keeping his hands visible and away from his weapon. He had heard enough stories about misunderstandings between white men and native tribes to know that one wrong move could end very badly. His heart hammered in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral, calm. The older man studied Joshua for what felt like an eternity. Then he spoke, and to Joshua's surprise, his English was clear and measured. "My daughter tells me you shared your last food with her when you had little yourself. You did not have to do this. Many white men would have left her to die." Joshua swallowed hard. "I could not leave her. She needed help." "And you needed food," the man said. "Yet you gave her half, knowing it might mean your own death." "I suppose I did not think too hard about it," Joshua admitted. "Just seemed like the right thing to do." The older man nodded slowly. He spoke to the other men in his language and they lowered their weapons slightly. Then he turned back to Joshua. "I am Takoda Morno. This is my daughter Talise. Our people, the Washu, have been pushed from our lands piece by piece. 3 days ago there was a raid by miners who wanted the water source near our camp. In the chaos, Talise became separated from us. We have been searching for her." The name clicked in Joshua's mind. He had heard of the Washu people, native to this part of Nevada and California, though he knew little about them beyond the basic fact of their existence. He had heard the stories of conflicts over land and water, the way settlers and miners pushed further and further into territory that had belonged to the tribes for generations. He had never paid much attention to those stories, too focused on his own survival, but standing here now with Takoda looking at him with those assessing eyes, it all felt suddenly very real and very immediate. "I am glad she is safe now," Joshua said carefully. Takoda nodded again. "You gave my daughter life when you could have saved yourself. This is a debt that must be honored. Among my people, such an action cannot go unanswered." Joshua shifted uncomfortably. "I do not need payment. I just did what anyone should do." "But not what most do," Takoda said. "I have a proposal for you," Joshua read. "Come with us to our camp. Stay for a time. You are clearly running from something and you have nowhere to go. We will give you food, shelter, and water. In return, you will teach us what you know of the white man's ways. We need to understand better how to negotiate, how to read the papers they make us sign, how to know when we are being cheated." The offer caught Joshua completely off guard. He had expected, at best, to be allowed to leave peacefully. At worst, he had feared violence despite Talise's words on his behalf. But this invitation to stay to live among them was something he had never anticipated. "I am not educated," Joshua said slowly. "I can read and write, and I know numbers well enough to avoid being cheated at cards, but I am no teacher." "You know more than we do," Takoda said, "and you have shown honor. That matters more than education." Joshua looked at Talise, who was watching him with an expression he could not quite read. Then he looked at his lame horse, at the vast empty desert around them, at the men who had come for Takoda's daughter. He thought about the brothers back in Yarrington who wanted to break his face, about the aimless wandering that had been his life for the past 5 years since the war ended, about the constant moving from town to town with nothing to show for it but scars and stories. "How long would you want me to stay?" he asked. "Until the debt is paid," Takoda said. "1 moon, perhaps 2, however long it takes for you to teach us what we need to know." Joshua took a deep breath. The smart thing would be to politely decline, to ask for directions to the nearest town, and to continue on his way. Getting involved with tribal affairs could bring trouble from the army, from settlers, from any number of sources. But looking at Talise, remembering how close she had been to death, remembering the simple human act of sharing food that had somehow led to this moment, he found himself nodding. "All right," he said, "I will stay." Takoda's stern expression softened slightly, not quite a smile but something close to approval. He spoke to the other men, who visibly relaxed. One of them brought forward a horse, a sturdy paint mare, and offered the reins to Joshua. "Your horse is injured," Takoda said. "We will care for him until he heals. You may ride this one." The camp was a 2-hour ride from the spring, nestled in a canyon that provided shelter from the wind and concealment from passing travelers. There were perhaps 20 dwellings, a mixture of traditional structures and canvas tents that had clearly been traded or taken from settlers. Women were working at fires, preparing food, while children played nearby. The people stopped to watch as Takoda's group rode in, their eyes full of curiosity when they saw Joshua. Talise dismounted quickly and was immediately surrounded by women, all speaking at once, touching her arms and face as if to confirm she was real. An older woman, her hair shot through with gray, pulled Talise into a fierce embrace. Joshua guessed this was her mother. Takoda led Joshua to a tent near the center of the camp. "You will stay here," he said. "It belonged to my brother before he died last winter. It is yours for as long as you remain with us." The tent was simple but well made, with a floor covered in woven mats and furs for sleeping. There was a fire pit just outside, and someone had already started a small fire there. It was more hospitality than Joshua had seen in a long time, certainly more than he expected to find in a Washoe camp. "Thank you," Joshua said, and he meant it. Takoda studied him for a moment longer. "My daughter is precious to me," Joshua read. "She is my only child, and her mother and I thought we had lost her. What you did, giving food when you had none to spare, that is the action of a man with honor. I hope you prove worthy of the trust I am placing in you." "I will do my best," Joshua said. Over the following days, Joshua began to settle into the rhythm of camp life. He was given food, simple but filling, mostly rabbit and fish from a nearby stream, along with roots and plants that the women gathered. He learned that the Washoe had lived in this region for countless generations, that they knew every plant, every animal, every water source for hundreds of miles. They had watched as white settlers came in increasing numbers, claiming land that had never been for sale, fighting wars over territory that had never been anyone's to claim in the first place. Takoda kept his word about the teaching. Each afternoon, he would gather a group of the men and a few of the women who were interested, and Joshua would work with them on reading and writing. He started with basic letters, using a stick to draw in the dirt since they had no paper or slates. Some picked it up quickly while others struggled, but all of them were eager to learn. "The white men come with papers," Takoda explained one day. "They say, sign here and this land will be yours forever, but forever means something different to them than it does to us. We sign, and then more white men come with different papers saying the land is theirs now. If we could read what the papers say, maybe we could protect ourselves better." Joshua understood the frustration in Takoda's voice. He had seen it himself, the way treaties were made and broken, the way laws seemed to shift depending on who had the power to enforce them. "I am not sure reading will protect you," he said carefully. "The men who write these papers, they know how to use words to hide the truth. But at least if you can read, you will know what they are trying to hide." As the days turned into weeks, Joshua found himself drawn more and more to Talise. She was often nearby during the lessons, listening intently even though she rarely spoke. Her English was limited, just a few words here and there, but she was learning quickly. Sometimes Joshua would catch her practicing letters in the dirt when she thought no one was watching. One evening, about 3 weeks into his stay, Talise approached him as he sat by his fire. She held a wooden bowl filled with some kind of stew, steam rising in the cool evening air. "For you," she said carefully, her accent thick but the words clear. "Thank you," Joshua said, taking the bowl. The stew smelled wonderful, rich and savory. "Did you make this?" She nodded, then sat down across the fire from him. For a while they sat in comfortable silence, Joshua eating while Talise watched the flames. "Why you help me?" she asked suddenly, her dark eyes meeting his across the fire. Joshua paused, considering the question. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "And because leaving someone to die when you can do something about it, that is not the kind of man I want to be." Talise frowned slightly, working through the words. "Many white men, they not help, they take, they hurt." "I know," Joshua said quietly. "I am sorry for that." "Not your fault," Talise said. She hesitated, then added, "You different." Joshua was not sure what to say to that, so he just nodded and continued eating. The stew was excellent, better than anything he had tasted in months. When he finished, Talise took the bowl from him and stood. "Teach me more words," she asked. "I want learn speak good." "Speak well," Joshua corrected gently. "And yes, I will teach you." So they began meeting each evening after the main lessons were done. Joshua would teach Talise English words and phrases, and she would teach him words in Washu. He learned that the word for thank you was Yadomi, that the word for friend was Demugu. He learned the names of plants and animals, the words for sun and moon and star. But more than that, he learned about Talise herself. She told him in her improving English about growing up in the mountains, about learning to track and hunt alongside her father, about the way life had been before the white settlers came in such great numbers. There was a sadness in her stories, a nostalgia for something that was slipping away, but there was also strength. She was not defeated, not broken. She was adapting, learning, fighting to preserve what she could of her people's way of life. Joshua found himself looking forward to these evening lessons more than he wanted to admit. Talise was sharp, picking up new words and concepts with impressive speed, but it was more than just her intelligence that drew him. There was a warmth to her, a kindness that showed itself in small ways. The way she made sure he always had food at dinner. The way she mended a tear in his shirt without being asked. The way she laughed, a bright, clear sound, when he mispronounced a Washu word badly enough to change its meaning to something absurd. 1 month passed, then 6 weeks. Joshua knew he should be thinking about leaving, about continuing on to Austin or maybe trying his luck in California. The brothers from Yarrington had probably forgotten about him by now, or at least moved on to other grudges. But every time he thought about packing up and riding out, something made him hesitate. It was Takoda who finally brought it up. He found Joshua one morning as Joshua was working with his horse, which had recovered well from its injury. "Your horse is healed," Takoda observed. "Yes," Joshua agreed. "He is ready to ride again. But you have not prepared to leave." Joshua looked up from checking the horse's hoof. Takoda stood with his arms crossed, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp. "I suppose I have been putting it off," Joshua admitted. "Why?" It was a simple question, but the answer was complicated. Joshua set down the horse's hoof and straightened, meeting Takoda's gaze. "Because I am not ready to go. If I am being honest, I am not sure I want to go at all." Takoda was quiet for a long moment. "You have taught us much." "The debt is paid," Joshua read. "You are free to leave when you wish, but you are also free to stay if that is your choice." "Would your people accept that?" Joshua asked. A white man living among you permanently, you have proven yourself, Takoda said. You work hard, you teach without condescension, you respect our ways. Yes, there are some who are suspicious, who will always see you as an outsider. But most have come to see what I see. A man of honor. A man who belongs here if he chooses to belong. Joshua felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he had not even realized he was carrying. What about Talise? He asked, the words coming out before he could stop them. Takoda's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been amusement. What about my daughter? I know I have been spending time with her, teaching her English. If that is inappropriate, if I have overstepped, Joshua, Takoda interrupted. I am not blind. I see how you look at her. I see how she looks at you. You think I invited you to stay without considering this possibility? Joshua stared at him. You knew. A father always knows, Takoda said. The question is not whether I approve. The question is what you intend to do about it. I do not know, Joshua said honestly. I care about her, more than I probably should. But I am just a drifting cowboy with nothing to my name. I have no land, no money, no prospects. What could I possibly offer her? You already offered her your life, Takoda pointed out. Everything else is just details. In my culture, a man who wishes to court a woman must prove himself worthy. You have already done that. But you must also be honest about your intentions. If you only want her for a brief time before you wander off again, then it is better you leave now. But if you want to build something real, something lasting, then you need to speak with her. And with me. Joshua took a deep breath. Everything in his life up until this point had been temporary. Temporary jobs, temporary towns, temporary relationships. He had convinced himself that was just how things were, that a man like him did not get to have anything permanent. But standing here in this canyon, in this camp that had somehow become home, with the memory of Talise's smile in his mind, he found himself wanting something different. I want to stay, he said. And I want to court Talise if she will have me properly, with your blessing. Takoda nodded slowly. Then you must ask her. Tonight, there will be a gathering. We are celebrating the harvest moon. It would be an appropriate time to make your intentions known. The rest of the day passed in a blur of nervous energy. Joshua cleaned himself up as best he could, washing in the stream and trimming his beard with his knife. He had no gifts to give, no flowers or jewelry, but one of the older women, seeing his distress, took pity on him. She gave him a small leather pouch filled with beads, explaining in broken English that it was traditional for a man to give such a gift when declaring his intentions. As the sun set, the camp gathered around a large central fire. There was food, more than usual, and someone had brought out a drum. The sound echoed through the canyon, primal and stirring. Children danced in the firelight while the adults talked and laughed. Joshua searched the crowd for Talise and found her sitting with a group of younger women. She had changed into a dress that was clearly special, the deerskin soft and supple, the beadwork intricate and beautiful. Her long black hair was loose, falling past her shoulders, and in the firelight she looked almost otherworldly. As if sensing his gaze, she looked up and their eyes met. She smiled, and Joshua felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. Takoda appeared at his elbow. Now would be a good time, he said quietly. Joshua nodded, his mouth suddenly dry. He walked toward Talise, aware that people were watching, aware that this was a public moment in a way that made him nervous. But when he reached her and she stood to meet him, all the nervousness faded away. There was only Talise, looking at him with those dark eyes that had haunted his dreams for weeks now. Talise Morno, he said, and his voice was steady. I have something I need to say to you. She tilted her head slightly, waiting. When I met you, I was just a drifter. A man with no home, no purpose, just moving from one place to the next. But these past weeks, being here, teaching, learning, spending time with you, I have found something I did not know I was looking for. I have found a place where I belong. But more than that, I have found someone who makes me want to be better than I am. He held out the pouch of beads. I am not much. I do not have wealth or land or anything that most men offer, but I have my word and I give it to you now. If you will have me, I will stay. I will work hard, I will honor your ways, and I will care for you for as long as you will let me. I am asking permission to court you properly, to see if what I feel, what I hope you might feel too, can become something more. The camp had gone quiet. Everyone was watching, but Joshua only cared about one person's reaction. Talise took the pouch from his hands, her fingers brushing against his. She looked down at it, then back up at him, and when she spoke, her English was careful but clear. When I was dying in desert, I prayed to spirits for help. They sent you. You give me food, your last food, and you ask nothing. You just give because it right thing. That tell me who you are inside. She paused, searching for words. I want know you more. I want see if what I feel is real. I say yes, Joshua Reed. You may court me. A cheer went up from the gathered people, and Joshua felt himself grinning like a fool. Talise was smiling too, a bright, beautiful smile that made everything else fade away. Takoda stepped forward, placing a hand on Joshua's shoulder. Then it is agreed. You will court my daughter with honor and respect. You will not be alone with her unchaperoned until a decision is made about marriage. You will continue to prove yourself worthy. Do you understand? I understand, Joshua said. Good. Takoda smiled, the first real smile Joshua had seen from the stern man. Then let us celebrate. The rest of the evening was a blur of joy. People came up to congratulate them, to welcome Joshua more fully into the community. The women teased Talise, who blushed and laughed. The men clapped Joshua on the back, their earlier suspicion replaced with acceptance. It was more than Joshua had ever hoped for, more than he had ever dreamed possible. As the night wore on and people began to drift back to their tents, Joshua found himself sitting by the fire with Talise beside him. They were not alone. Takoda and a few others were still nearby, but it felt private enough. I am glad you said yes, Joshua said quietly. I am glad you asked, Talise replied. She leaned a little closer, not quite touching but near enough that he could feel her warmth. I was afraid you leave, go back to white man's world. This is my world now, Joshua said. If you will have me in it. I will, she said softly. The courting period that followed was both wonderful and frustrating. Wonderful because Joshua got to spend time with Talise every day, learning more about her, sharing stories and dreams and hopes. Frustrating because they were never alone, always chaperoned by Talise's mother or one of the other women. But Joshua understood the reason for it and respected the tradition. They would walk together in the mornings, followed at a discreet distance by a chaperone, talking about everything and nothing. Talise told him about her childhood, about learning to weave baskets from her grandmother, about the stories her people told about how the world came to be. Joshua told her about growing up in Missouri, about losing his family to fever when he was 16, about fighting in the war and trying to find his way afterward. You have lost much, Talise said one morning as they walked beside the stream. So have you, Joshua pointed out. Your people have lost their lands, their way of life. Yes, she agreed. But we still have each other, family, community, what you have. I have you, Joshua said. If you will have me, she smiled at that. You say that much, if you will have me, I already say yes. You not need keep asking. I just want to make sure you know you have a choice, Joshua said. You are not obligated to me just because I shared some food. If you change your mind, Joshua. She stopped walking and turned to face him. "You good man, kind man, every day I see this more clear, I not change mind. But you, maybe you change mind when you learn more about me." "I do not think that is possible," Joshua said. "I am stubborn," Talise warned. "My mother say I like the mountain goat, always climbing where I should not go. I not like being told what to do, I speak my mind too much. These things, they make me not good Washu woman sometimes." Joshua laughed. "You think I want someone who just agrees with everything I say? Talise, I fell for you because you are strong, because you survived that desert through sheer will. Because when you decided to lead me to that spring, you did it even though you could barely walk. I do not want you to be different. I want you exactly as you are." Her eyes softened. "You say right things." "I say true things," Joshua corrected. Behind them, Talise's mother cleared her throat, a reminder that they were not alone. Talise rolled her eyes but stepped back, maintaining the proper distance. But the look she gave Joshua promised that when they were finally allowed to be alone, things would be different. As fall deepened and winter approached, Joshua worked harder than he ever had in his life. He hunted with the men, learning their techniques and sharing his own knowledge of tracking. He helped prepare the camp for winter, reinforcing tents and structures, gathering firewood. He continued teaching reading and writing, and was pleased to see real progress. Takoda could now read simple contracts and letters, and several of the younger people were becoming quite proficient. But more than any of that, he courted Talise. He learned what made her laugh, what made her angry, what dreams she held in her heart. He learned that she wanted to preserve her people's traditions, but also understood the need to adapt to the changing world. She wanted children someday, she told him shyly, children who would know both their Washu heritage and how to survive in the white man's world. "I want that too," Joshua told her. "I want to build a life with you, a real life, not just surviving but living." It was early December when Takoda called Joshua to his tent. The old man looked serious, and Joshua felt a flutter of nervousness. Had he done something wrong? Had Takoda changed his mind about allowing the courtship? "Sit," Takoda said, gesturing to a fur-covered seat. Joshua sat, waiting. "You have been with us for nearly 4 months, Takoda began. "You have proven yourself many times over. You work hard, you treat my daughter with respect, you honor our ways. The people have accepted you." "I am grateful for that," Joshua said. "My daughter loves you," Takoda continued. "She has told her mother this, and her mother has told me. She wishes to marry you." Joshua's heart began to race. "I want to marry her too, more than anything." "Then you must understand what that means," Takoda said seriously. "It means you become part of this tribe. Not just living here, but truly part of us. It means when we face trouble, you face it too. It means when the government tries to move us or take our lands, you stand with us. It means your children will be both white and Washu, and they will face challenges because of that. It means your life will be harder than if you just married a white woman and lived in a white town." "I understand," Joshua said. "And I choose this. I choose Talise, I choose this life, I choose this family. I know it will not be easy, but nothing worth having ever is." Takoda studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then you have my blessing. We will have the ceremony at the next new moon. That gives you 2 weeks to prepare." Those 2 weeks were a flurry of activity. Joshua had no family to invite, but Talise's extended family came from other camps, traveling through the early winter weather to attend. Joshua was taught the traditional customs, the vows he would need to make, the ceremony's significance. The women prepared Talise's wedding dress, adding new beadwork and decorations. The men prepared the feast, hunting and fishing and gathering. Joshua found himself surprisingly nervous as the day approached. He had never thought he would marry, had convinced himself that kind of life was not for men like him. But here he was, about to pledge himself to a woman who had somehow become his entire world in the space of a few months. The night before the wedding, Takoda took him aside. "Tomorrow, you become my son. I want you to know that I am proud of the man you are. My daughter could not have chosen better." "Thank you," Joshua said, his throat tight with emotion. "I will spend my life making sure she never regrets that choice." The wedding ceremony took place at dawn, as the first light touched the tops of the canyon walls. Talise wore her wedding dress, beautiful and adorned with shells and beads that caught the light. Her hair was braided and decorated with feathers. She looked radiant. Joshua wore new clothes that the women had made for him, a shirt of soft leather decorated in the Washu style. He felt out of place and perfectly at home all at once. The ceremony was conducted by the tribe's elder, a woman named Wainma who must have been 80 years old but whose eyes were sharp and clear. She spoke in Washu, and Takoda translated for Joshua. She talked about the joining of two lives, two paths becoming one. She talked about respect and love and the responsibilities of marriage. She had Joshua and Talise hold hands while she wrapped them together with a woven cord, symbolizing their binding. Then it was time for vows. Talise spoke first in Washu, and though Joshua did not understand all the words, he understood the meaning in her voice, the love and commitment. Then it was his turn. He spoke in English and Takoda translated. "I, Joshua Reed, take you, Talise Morno, as my wife. I promise to honor you, to protect you, to provide for you. I promise to respect your ways and your people. I promise to be a good husband and, if we are blessed, a good father. I promise to love you all the days of my life and beyond." Wainma unwrapped the cord and handed it to Talise. "Keep this," she said in English. "It is symbol of your union. When times are hard, remember this day. Remember the promises." And then it was done. They were married. The camp erupted in celebration, and Joshua pulled Talise close, kissing her for the first time in front of everyone. She kissed him back, and the world narrowed to just the two of them, just this moment, just this perfect beginning. The feast lasted all day. There was more food than Joshua had seen in months, and everyone ate until they could eat no more. There was music and dancing, stories and laughter. As the sun set and the stars came out, people began to drift away, heading to their own tents, leaving the newlyweds to finally be alone. Takoda had given them a new tent, larger and more private, set a little apart from the others. Inside, furs and blankets had been arranged, and a small fire burned in a stone-ringed pit. It was warm and intimate and theirs. Talise stood in the center of the tent, suddenly shy. Joshua took her hands in his. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly. "Little bit," she admitted. "You?" "Terrified," he said with a small laugh. "I have never been married before. I have never had something this important to lose." "You not lose me," Talise said. "I am here, always." He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper. She responded eagerly, her arms going around his neck. They sank down onto the furs together, and Joshua took his time, learning every inch of his wife, showing her with actions what words could never fully express. Later, wrapped in each other's arms, Talise traced patterns on his chest with her finger. "I am happy," she said softly. "So am I," Joshua replied, "happier than I ever thought possible." "You think about future?" she asked. "What you want for us?" "I think about it all the time," Joshua admitted. "I want to build us a good life. I want to help your people as much as I can. I want children with you when the time is right. I want to grow old watching sunsets from this canyon." "That sound good," Talise said, "but you know it not be easy. White men still come, still take. We might have to fight, might have to move." Then we face it together, Joshua said. Whatever comes, we face it together. The winter that followed their marriage was hard but good. Food was sometimes scarce and the cold was bitter, but Joshua had never been happier. He and Talise settled into married life, learning each other's rhythms and habits. She taught him more of her language and her people's ways. He taught her more English and how to read. They talked about everything, planned for the future, made love in their tent while snow fell outside. In early spring, Talise told him she was pregnant. Joshua felt a rush of emotion so strong he could barely speak. Joy, terror, excitement, fear. He was going to be a father. He had never thought he wanted that, but now that it was happening, he could not imagine wanting anything more. "You are happy?" Talise asked, watching his face carefully. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Joshua said, pulling her close. "You are giving me a family. You have given me a home. You have given me a reason to be better than I was." The pregnancy was not easy. Talise was sick in the mornings for months, and there were times when Joshua worried about her health. But the tribe's medicine woman, an ancient figure who knew herbs and remedies, took good care of her. She assured Joshua that everything was normal, that Talise was strong and the baby was healthy. As Talise's belly grew, Joshua found himself consumed with preparations. He improved their tent, making it more secure and comfortable. He hunted constantly, building up stores of dried meat for when the baby came and Talise would need to rest. He carved a wooden cradle, working late into the night to get it just right. Takoda watched all this with approval. "You will be a good father," he told Joshua one day. "I hope so," Joshua said. "I never knew my own father. He died when I was too young to remember him. I do not know how to do this." "None of us know until we do it," Takoda said. "But you have a good heart. That is enough." The baby came in late October, just as the leaves were turning gold. The birth was long and difficult, and Joshua paced outside the tent where the women had gathered to help Talise, feeling more helpless than he ever had in his life. He could face down angry card players. He could survive in the desert. He could learn a new language and adapt to a new culture. But he could not do anything to ease his wife's pain. Finally, after what felt like days but was probably only 12 hours, he heard the sound he had been waiting for. The thin, angry wail of a newborn baby. One of the women emerged from the tent smiling. "You have a son," she said. "Mother and baby are well." Joshua practically ran into the tent. Talise lay on the furs, exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft leather. Joshua knelt beside them, his hands shaking as he looked at his son for the first time. The baby was perfect. Tiny and red-faced and perfect. He had a shock of dark hair, and his eyes, when they opened briefly, were dark like his mother's. He was half Washu, half white, all theirs. "He is beautiful," Joshua whispered. "You are beautiful. I love you both so much." "What we name him?" Talise asked. "In my people's way and white way." They had discussed this during the pregnancy. In Washu tradition, names often came from nature or from qualities the parents hoped the child would possess. In white tradition, names often honored family members. "In English, I would like to name him Jacob," Joshua said. "It means supplanter, one who follows after. It was my grandfather's name." "Jacob," Talise repeated, testing the sound. "Jacob Reed, it is good. In Washu, I want call him Takoda after my father, mean friend to everyone." "Jacob Takoda Reed," Joshua said. "It is perfect." When Takoda came to meet his grandson, there were tears in the old man's eyes. "You honor me," he said to Talise and Joshua. "This child, he will walk in two worlds. You must teach him both, help him find his way." "We will," Joshua promised. The first years of Jacob's life were busy and joyful. Joshua learned how to be a father, how to soothe a crying baby, how to change swaddling cloths, how to make Talise laugh when she was exhausted from another sleepless night. He watched his son grow from a tiny infant into a curious toddler, fascinated by everything he saw. The world outside the canyon continued to change. More settlers came to Nevada, more miners, more ranchers. The Washoe found themselves increasingly pressured to give up their traditional lands, to move onto reservations. Takoda and the other leaders fought these changes. Using the reading and writing skills Joshua had taught them to understand the treaties and documents the government agents brought. Sometimes they won small victories, getting better terms or holding onto a piece of land. Sometimes they lost. Through it all, Joshua stood with them. He helped negotiate with white officials, translating not just words but intentions, helping both sides understand each other a little better. It did not always work, and there were times when he felt the hatred from both sides. White men who saw him as a traitor and tribal members who still did not fully trust him. But he kept trying because this was his family now, his people. When Jacob was 3, Talise became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and when the baby came, it was a girl. They named her Talula after Talise's grandmother, with the middle name Grace. She had Joshua's green eyes and Talise's dark hair, and from the moment she was born, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Life settled into a pattern. Joshua continued to teach reading and writing to those who wanted to learn. He hunted and provided for his family. He played with his children, teaching Jacob to ride and track, teaching Talula her letters even when she was barely old enough to understand. He made love to his wife and thanked whatever powers had brought them together, but the pressures from the outside world kept building. In 1880, when Jacob was 3 and Talula just a baby, government agents came with orders that the Washoe must move to a reservation near the California border. The land they had called home, this canyon that had sheltered them, was wanted by ranchers who had the backing of politicians. Takoda called a council meeting. All the adults gathered to discuss what to do. Some wanted to fight, to refuse to leave. Others wanted to go peacefully, hoping that compliance would earn them better treatment. The debate went on for hours. Finally, Takoda stood. "We cannot win a war against the United States government. We do not have the numbers or the weapons. If we fight, we die. But if we go to this reservation, we lose everything we have been, everything our ancestors knew. Joshua, you have lived in both worlds. What do you say?" All eyes turned to Joshua. He held Talula in his arms, with Jacob standing close beside him. Talise was nearby, her face tight with worry. He looked at his family, at the people who had become his people, and he thought carefully before speaking. "I say we negotiate," he said finally. "Not surrender, not fight, but negotiate. We ask for things in return for moving. We ask for land that has water and game, for the right to practice your traditions, for schools where our children can learn both English and Washoe. We make them put it in writing, in a treaty we can read and understand. It is not perfect, it is not justice, but it is survival. And sometimes survival is all we can manage." There was silence, then murmuring. Takoda nodded slowly. "It is wise counsel. We will try this way." The negotiations took months. Joshua served as one of the translators and advisors, working with Takoda and the other leaders to push for the best terms they could get. The government agents were not happy about the delays or the demands, but eventually they agreed to most of what the Washoe asked for. The reservation land was decent, with access to a river and forests. They would be allowed to maintain their traditions. A school would be built where children could learn both cultures. It was not what anyone wanted, but it was better than it could have been. The move happened in the spring of 1881. It was heartbreaking to leave the canyon, the place where Joshua and Talise had married, where their children had been born. But they packed up their belongings and made the journey with the rest of the tribe, heading west into California. The reservation was strange at first, and there were problems. The government agents assigned to manage the reservation were sometimes cruel or corrupt. Supplies that were promised did not always arrive. There were conflicts with neighboring ranchers over water rights. But the Washoe persevered, and Joshua helped however he could, writing letters to government officials, keeping careful records of what was promised versus what was delivered, teaching more people to read so they could advocate for themselves. Through it all, his family grew. Talise became pregnant twice more, giving them another son, whom they named James Tacoder Reed, and another daughter, whom they named Tessa Marie Reid. Their tent gave way to a small house that Joshua built with his own hands, using lumber he earned by working for a nearby mill. It was not much, just 3 rooms, but it was solid and warm and theirs. Jacob grew into a smart, curious boy who loved learning. He spoke both English and Washoe fluently and moved between both cultures with an ease that amazed Joshua. Talula was more reserved but no less bright, with a talent for weaving baskets that made the elder women praise her skills. James was boisterous and wild, always getting into trouble, while Tessa was quiet and serious, observing everything with wide green eyes. Joshua watched his children grow and felt a pride so deep, it sometimes brought tears to his eyes. These were his children, carrying his blood and Talise's, bridging 2 worlds. They faced challenges, certainly. There were white children who called them names, tribal children who said they were not fully Washoe. But they were strong, raised by parents who loved them fiercely and taught them to be proud of who they were. Tacoda lived long enough to see all 4 of his grandchildren born. He died peacefully in his sleep in 1886, at the age of 55, worn down by years of fighting for his people's survival. Joshua mourned him deeply, this man who had become his father in every way that mattered. "He was proud of you," Talise told Joshua at the funeral. "He told me many times how grateful he was that the spirits sent you to us." "I am the one who should be grateful," Joshua said. "He gave me a family, he gave me a home, he gave me you." As the years passed, life on the reservation improved slowly. The school was built, and Joshua helped teach there, working with white teachers to ensure that Washoe language and culture were included in the curriculum. More tribal members learned to read and write, and they became better at protecting their rights and interests. The children grew. Jacob, showing a gift for words and diplomacy like his father, talked about becoming a lawyer someday to help Indian tribes fight legal battles. Talula married a young man from a neighboring tribe at 18, a good man who treated her with respect and love. James followed in his grandfather's footsteps, becoming a skilled hunter and tracker. Tessa, the youngest, surprised everyone by declaring at age 10 that she wanted to be a doctor to help her people with medicine. Joshua and Talise watched their children build their own lives with pride and joy. They grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. Joshua's hair went gray, and lines appeared at the corners of Talise's eyes, but when he looked at her, he still saw the young woman dying in the desert, the woman who had changed his entire life. On their 20th wedding anniversary, in December of 1898, Joshua took Talise to a hill overlooking the reservation where they could see for miles. It was a clear day, the sky that perfect blue that only comes in winter. "You ever regret it?" Joshua asked, holding her hand. "Marrying me?" "The difficulties it brought," Talise laughed. "You still ask this? After 20 years, 4 children, life together, "You fool man," Joshua read. "I just want to make sure you are happy," Joshua said. "I am happy every day I wake up next to you," Talise said. "You save my life in desert. But more than that, you give me life worth living. You give me love, family, partner who see me as equal. Not many women have this, white or washu. I am lucky." "I am the lucky one," Joshua said. "I was just drifting before I met you. Now I have everything." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. Below them, they could see their house, smoke rising from the chimney. They could see their grandchildren playing outside Talula's home. They could see the community they were part of, the life they had built. "You think our children be okay?" Talise asked. "World still so hard for them." "They will be more than okay," Joshua said confidently. "We raised them strong, taught them both their heritages, gave them the tools to fight for themselves. They will face challenges, yes, but they will overcome them, just like we did." "Just like we did," Talise agreed. As the years continued to roll forward, Joshua and Talise became the elder statesmen of their community. People came to them for advice, for mediation in disputes, for the wisdom that comes from living through hard times and emerging intact. Joshua continued to teach, now focusing on the youngest generation, making sure they learned to read and write and understand the laws that governed their lives. Jacob fulfilled his dream of becoming a lawyer, the first from their tribe to do so. He moved to San Francisco to study, but came home often, bringing his wife and, eventually, his own children to visit. He took on cases defending Indian rights and became known as a fierce advocate. Talula and her husband had 5 children of their own and remained on the reservation, deeply involved in preserving traditional crafts and teaching them to the younger generation. James became a guide for white hunters and tourists, using his knowledge of the land to earn a good living while also educating people about Washoe culture. Tessa, despite facing discrimination and hardship, earned her medical degree and returned to work as a doctor, serving both the reservation and the surrounding white communities. Joshua could not have been more proud of any of them. In the spring of 1910, when Joshua was 63 and Talise was 60, they celebrated the birth of their 20th grandchild. The family gathered for a feast, 3 generations filling their home and spilling out into the yard. Joshua looked around at all these people, all this life that had come from one act of sharing food with a starving woman, and he felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That evening, after everyone had left, he and Talise sat on their porch watching the stars come out. "We did good, I think," Talise said softly, leaning against him. "We did very good," Joshua agreed. "All those children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, all that love, it is more than I ever imagined possible." "You remember the desert?" Talise asked. "When you find me?" "Every detail," Joshua said. "I remember thinking I was going to die. I remember finding you and making the choice to share what little I had. I remember thinking it was probably a foolish choice." "Best foolish choice you ever make," Talise said with a smile. "The best choice I ever made," Joshua corrected. "Nothing foolish about it at all." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that comes from decades of knowing each other so well that words become optional. "Joshua," Talise said eventually. "Yes, love." "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything. For life you give me, for love you show me, for family we make together, for staying when you could have left, for choosing us, choosing me every day for more than 30 years. Thank you." Joshua felt tears sting his eyes. He turned to her and cupped her face gently in his weathered hands. "Talise, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Sharing that meal with you was not just saving your life. It was saving mine. I was lost before I met you, just surviving but not living. You taught me how to live. You gave me purpose and meaning and joy. So no, do not thank me. Let me thank you for taking a chance on a drifting cowboy who had nothing to offer but his heart. She kissed him then, soft and sweet, the kind of kiss that speaks of deep, abiding love. When they parted, both of them were crying. We are getting old and sentimental, Talise said with a watery laugh. We are allowed to be, Joshua said. We have earned it. The years continued to pass as they always do. Joshua and Talise aged gracefully, their love never diminishing despite the physical toll of time. They remained active in the community as long as they could, Joshua teaching until his eyes grew too weak to see the letters clearly. Talise weaving baskets until her fingers became too stiff with arthritis. In 1915, Jacob convinced them to let a traveling photographer take their picture. The resulting photograph showed an elderly couple, weathered by sun and time, seated side by side with their hands clasped. Joshua's beard was white, Talise's hair streaked with gray and gathered in traditional braids. But their eyes shone with life and love, and anyone who looked at the photograph could see the deep connection between them. That photograph would become a treasured family heirloom, passed down through generations, a testament to a love that bridged cultures and overcame countless obstacles. Joshua passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1918, at the age of 71. He had lived to see the end of one world war and the dawn of a new era. His funeral was attended by hundreds of people, both native and white, all of whom had been touched by his kindness, his wisdom, and his unwavering commitment to justice and understanding. Talise stood at his grave, supported by her children, and spoke the traditional Washoe words for farewell. Then she added in English for the benefit of all who had gathered, "He was good man. He saved my life and then he fill it with joy. He father to my children, grandfather to many. He walk in two worlds and bring them together. We will not forget him." After Joshua's death, Talise lived another 5 years. She spent them surrounded by family, telling stories of her life with Joshua to anyone who would listen. She wanted to make sure that future generations would know the story, would understand that love could transcend boundaries, that one act of kindness could change everything. She died in the spring of 1923 at the age of 73 and was buried beside Joshua. At her funeral, Jacob read from a letter his father had written to his mother on their 10th anniversary, a letter that Talise had kept all these years. "My dearest Talise," Jacob read, his voice thick with emotion. 10 years ago, I was a man with nothing, going nowhere. Then I found you in the desert, and in choosing to share my last meal with you, I found my purpose. You have given me everything that matters: love, family, home, meaning. Every day with you is a gift I do not deserve but am endlessly grateful for. I love you more than words can express, more than actions can show. You are my heart, my home, my reason for being. Forever yours, Joshua. There was not a dry eye among the gathered mourners. The legacy of Joshua and Talise lived on through their descendants. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren carried forward the lessons they had learned. The example of love and courage and persistence in the face of hardship. The family grew large and far-flung, some remaining on the reservation, others moving to cities and towns across the country, but all of them carrying the story of how their family began. Jacob Reed became a prominent lawyer and advocate for Native American rights, arguing cases all the way to the Supreme Court. His work helped establish legal precedents that protected tribal sovereignty and land rights. He credited his father's example of crossing cultural boundaries, and his mother's insistence on knowing how to read and understand the law. Talula kept the traditional crafts alive, teaching generations of young Washoe women how to weave baskets in the old way. Her work was eventually recognized by museums and collectors, but she always insisted that the baskets were not just art, but a connection to her ancestors and to the land. James worked as a guide and tracker until his death in 1945, known throughout Nevada and California as an honest man who respected both the land and the people who used it. He taught countless young men, both native and white, how to survive in the wilderness and how to treat it with respect. Tessa became a pioneering doctor whose work in public health among Native American communities earned her national recognition. She opened clinics on multiple reservations and trained other Native women to become nurses and doctors. She never forgot her father's example of service or her mother's strength in the face of adversity. The story of Joshua and Talise became something of a legend in their family and in the broader Washoe community. It was a story about love, yes, but also about the power of a single choice, a single moment of compassion. Joshua could have walked past Talise that day in the desert. He could have kept his food for himself. He could have calculated that his own survival mattered more than hers, but he did not. He chose compassion over self-preservation, and that choice rippled forward through time, affecting not just 2 lives but hundreds, eventually thousands of lives as the family grew and spread. In 1978, exactly 100 years after Joshua first shared his last meal with Talise, the family held a reunion on the reservation. Descendants came from all over the country, more than 200 people who could trace their lineage back to that moment in the desert. They shared stories, looked at old photographs, visited the graves of Joshua and Talise, and celebrated the love that had started it all. The eldest person at the reunion was Sarah Reed Thompson, Talula's youngest daughter, 92 years old and sharp as ever. She stood before the gathered family and told the story one more time, the story she had heard from her grandmother Talise many times as a child. "My grandmother was dying in the desert," Sarah said. "She had been separated from her family, and she had no food, no water, no hope. Then a cowboy found her. He was in bad shape himself, with only a scrap of food left and no water. By all logic, he should have kept that food for himself. But he did not. He tore it in half and gave her portion after portion, knowing it might cost him his life." Sarah paused, looking out at all the faces watching her, faces that showed the mix of native and white heritage, faces that would not exist if not for one act of kindness. "Grandmother always said that Joshua did not just share his food that day," Sarah continued. "He shared his humanity. He saw another person in need and responded with compassion. And when her father came at dawn and saw what Joshua had done, he knew this was a man of honor. So he made a proposal. Stay with us, learn from us, teach us, and maybe, if things go well, court my daughter." There was laughter from the crowd, the comfortable laughter of a family that knows its own story well. "And things did go well," Sarah said. "Joshua and Talise fell in love. They married and had 4 children who had children of their own who had children of their own, until now here we all are. More than 200 descendants from one act of sharing, one choice to put another person's needs before your own." Sarah's voice grew stronger, more passionate. "This is what I want you all to remember. We live in a world that tells us to look out for ourselves first, to hoard what we have, to see others as competition or threats. But our family exists because one man chose differently. He chose compassion. He chose love, and it made all the difference." She held up the old photograph from 1915, the one showing Joshua and Talise in their old age, hands clasped, eyes shining. This is what love looks like. Not perfect, not easy, but real and lasting and powerful enough to create all of us. So I challenge you, all of you, to live like Joshua and Talise did. Choose compassion. Choose to share what you have. Choose to see the humanity in others, even when it costs you something. Because you never know what ripples your choices will create. The reunion ended with a feast that would have made Joshua and Talise proud. With traditional Washoe foods and dishes from the many cultures the family had married into over the years. There was music and dancing and storytelling late into the night, and through it all, the spirit of Joshua and Talise seemed to hover over the gathering, blessing all who had come from their union. The story did not end there, of course. Stories like this never really end. They continue forward through time, each generation adding new chapters, new lives, new loves. But the core of it, the heart of it, remains the same. A cowboy shared his last meal with a starving tribal woman. At dawn, her father came with a proposal. And from that simple beginning, a great love story was born, a love that transcended cultural boundaries and created a legacy that would endure for generations. It was a love built on sacrifice and respect, on learning and adaptation, on choosing each other every single day despite the obstacles. It was not always easy. There were hardships and losses, discrimination and struggles. But through it all, Joshua and Talise held onto each other and to the love they had built. They proved that love can bridge any divide if both people are willing to meet in the middle. They proved that one act of kindness can change not just one life but countless lives. They proved that family is not just about blood but about choice, about deciding who you will stand with and fight for. And perhaps most importantly, they proved that even in the harsh, unforgiving landscape of the Wild West, even in a time of conflict and cultural collision, love can not only survive but thrive. It can create beauty from hardship, hope from despair, and a future from what might have been a forgotten death in the desert. The sun set over the reservation that night in 1978, painting the sky in those same shades of orange and pink that Joshua had seen the day he found Talise. Somewhere, perhaps, his spirit and hers watched over their descendants, proud of all they had become, grateful for the love that had made it all possible. And the story lived on, passed from generation to generation, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of love, and the enduring legacy of one cowboy who chose to share his last meal with a stranger, and in doing so, found everything he had ever been searching for.